it's coming up to probably, yeah, I think next week will be the 3 months of both mum and dad passing away. And I mean, it's still an absolute roller coaster. It feels like it's such a strange thing to describe. Like, I've had people say this to me before, like, it doesn't necessarily get, well, it does get easier, I think, but it's just constantly changing and evolving. It's almost similar to, this is probably a very weird analogy and metaphor to describe grief to, but in some ways it's like meditation, um, in the sense that I don't think you really ever get good at meditation. Like people say, oh, my mind keeps getting distracted, and it's like, well, that will keep happening. Like, I don't think I've meditated, almost every day for probably 7 years now, thousands of hours in meditation, and you don't really get better at it. You get better at feeling and being aware, but you know, I still have days where I can't focus at all. And I have other days where it feels really good. And it's just a changing thing. And it's the dynamic changing nature of the mind, right? And it's kind of similar, I think, with grief as well. Like, there are just so many different connection points and events and things that happen day to day, and different layers of your subconscious that are revealed, and you know and then things come out of that. And actually, this is one of the things that I've been working on my counselor at the moment is, and I may have mentioned this in a previous video, but the kind of relationship with my dad. Like, I'm always talking about mum predominantly. Um, and there's just a lot of unexplored feelings and emotions, I think, when it comes to dad. So it's been interesting diving into those. And I do a kind of like a journal every morning, just a stream of consciousness writing. And sometimes I will write to mum and dad, and other times I will just write stream of consciousness, like whatever just comes to mind, and it won't always be to them, but sometimes I will kind of feel called to writing to them directly. And I wrote, it was just like a short thing this morning, and it was kind of interesting. It was, just reading it back, it was like, wow, okay, this is kind of, and some of them are just really random as well. Like, I wouldn't normally share these, but I thought this one was quite interesting. It kind of illustrated how a lot of these things um kind of come to the surface that I hadn't really touched on before. So I wrote to both of them. So I said, it said, Buongiorno Motherino. I used to call mum Motherino, because we used to say, I say Buongiorno to everyone for some reason, and Buongiorno Motherino just seemed to work. I call her mother, and then I just tagged Reno on the end for some reason. Buongiorno Motherino. What a funny and random word of Motherino. This is like this is my stream of consciousness. I write something and then I'm like, that's weird. Um, what a funny and random word. What a beautiful person you were in the form you came to us in. Absolutely the best of them. I hope I never made you feel like a burden or feel alone. Sometimes, like, things come up. This is why I really like stream of consciousness. Things come up and you kind of like sit from, and this is something I'm trying to get better at, is like sitting for a moment and feeling into that, like where that comes from. Because I was like, wrote it and I was like, oh, it's kind of a bit intense. But it is something that I do feel, and I don't feel like is fully reconciled yet. It's something that, and I can feel it, like, the emotions in my chest right now. The I feel like for my relationship with mum, and this is what I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing where these kind of things in your subconscious start coming to the surface. Every time I would see mum, um, she was always stressed about something. And we used to play out this cycle where, she'd come to me and tell me all her worries and anxieties, and I would tell her, chill out, you know, stop stressing about this, just do this thing. And it felt like that was our relationship. It was just this constant cycle of, she would confide in me about X, Y, and Z, and I would just tell her to relax and just to, stop stressing so much. And I just, there is this kind of part of me inside that always feel, and even when she was still here, I always used to like come away from those conversations and just feel like, I hope, I just I hope she doesn't feel like she's like burdening me with her problems, you know? Um, because everything I said and I used to get quite angry sometimes as well, like annoyed with her because she would keep having the same issues, and it would hurt me to see her struggling so much. It's really horrible, painful thing to see. Um, and that would then manifest as anger because it's like why does this keep happening? Why is she suffering so much? It's so hard to see the ones that you love suffer. And the irony is that for me, it then manifested as anger and frustration toward her. Although it wasn't toward her, but it came out toward her, and I'd kind of messaged her every, maybe like once or twice a year. I would send her a message after like repeated bouts of this happening and say like, I hope you don't ever feel like a burden, and um, like I just want you to be happy, kind of thing. Um, but that is still a feeling there, it's just horrible to think that. So I said, yeah, I hope I never made you feel like a burden or feel alone. This is, the other thing as well. She talked before about, how lonely she was. And I think this is like the weight of, um, responsibility, I think, that I felt and I kind of took upon. It's funny because I would always say to myself, and I would say to her as well, like, you know, I can't be responsible for your happiness. But I still, I think subconsciously, I still took that on, to a large extent. And I would be firm with myself, and I would say like, no, I'm not gonna, just drop everything and meet her for coffee and stuff. And it's a constant battle, is a constant battle of like, and there's a lot of frustration and anger there as well. And again, this is something I've been working with my counselor on that I hadn't really tapped into before. But there is a frustration of like, I want to see my mum because I love her, but there is this like the feeling of responsibility is very frustrating. I don't want to feel responsible. I want to see her because I want to see her. Do you know what I mean? And it's this weird cycle, and it's self-created cycle that I live within. Um, yeah, and to be fair to her, to be very clear, like she never put that responsibility on me. I could feel it sometimes from her energetically, just that she was lonely. And I used to say to her all the time, like, Mum, like, we need to like go on like meetup.com, go to some book clubs. Like I was always trying to sign her up, and she just, never did it. And I think, bless her, just, she had such a lack of confidence over the years. And I think particularly, I guess, when mum and dad got divorced, that knocked her confidence. And then, probably every year she spent alone just impacted her confidence more and more. And, the way I treated her when I was younger probably didn't help as well. But, you know, again, this is where it kind of probably felt to her like I was just always not having a go at her, but like always like, Mum, like, do this thing, sign up for this thing. And I'd always try and give her these words of encouragement, and I'd sign up on the app for her, and I'd say, look, you just need to do this. And she wouldn't do it. And it is hard, it is hard when you're in that place, and, you've been stuck in a certain way for so long. It's really hard to break out of that. Anyway, a bit of a tangent there, but these are the, the kind of things that um it's just coming up much more now. And it's like, I think initially it's the grief and the loss and the feeling of that person not being there and adjusting to that. And then, there are just random things that come up like this, in other people, in conversations and events that happen, these different feelings and points of connection or whatever it might be. um where was I? So yeah, you I hope it never made you feel like a burden or feel alone. I love you and miss you with all my heart and soul. Dad, uh, said in brackets, I don't really have any other name for you because I didn't, didn't have any nicknames for Dad. But it's been interesting feeling into the anger, disappointment, and frustration that I had for you. Frustration, anger and frustration, I feel. Disappointment was an interesting one for me that I hadn't really considered before. And again, this is something that kind of came to surface when I was working with my counselor. Um, in a lot of ways, really, like, I always looked up to Dad, and I think there was a real sense of disappointment in many ways, in like, one, him not being there, although he was, but like as a kid, I didn't understand that, right? Two, just, you know, I think in my school years, the way he the way it felt like he treated us, like, wanting us to get good grades and all this and that. And I think there was, a disappointment in the way that only as a child, it's kind of like, you were so cool. You were such a, you were this businessman, and now you're just this annoying person. And it's like, well, actually, him being a businessman, the traits that he was exhibiting, getting us to work hard at school, that was exactly the kind of things that I would have needed to, pursue that. Um, but as a kid, you don't really understand that, right? So there was definitely, I think, as my inner child, if you want to call it that, like a feeling of disappointment there for sure. Um, and then I went on to say it was beautiful getting to know you. You can know the real you, both in your later years. Um, both in your later years, um, and after, from your friends and family after you passed. Um, I said, I wish you and Mum could have worked out. And even that, like that, I've never really thought about that before. But one of the things I did go on to say, which I think is really true, I really do feel this. I wish you and Mum could have worked out. And I think if anything, when I feel into that, it's more, I say that more for Mum, because Dad remarried, and he was happy, and he's got, like, you know, he had like Lisa and Hannah and Oliver, um, who are all amazing, so, and they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for him getting remarried. So, there's a beautiful side to that, I think. But if anything, it's kind of selfishly for Mum, like, either they stay together or if Mum found someone else, but it's just, there's this feeling of, and I know I shouldn't feel this because I know Mum wouldn't want me to ever feel like sorry for her, but I do. That's where it comes from. It's this feeling of like, such an amazing person, and she had to go through life feeling lonely. But anyway, so, um, I wish your mum could have worked out, but my life wouldn't look like it does today, and I'm not sure that I would want it in any other way. And I genuinely mean that. And I said this to Mum before, like, the way, like, she always used to say, "Oh, I feel like didn't know what I was doing, and it was terrible." And I said to her so many times, like, "Mum, like, I'm honestly feel so grateful for the person I am today. I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for all of these things that happened." Um, so I said, like, I hope you both know, um, that it would. I hope you both know that whilst it would have been hard for both of you, the way me and Ben turned out as a result of what we all went through is something beautiful. And just finished with love you both dearly. So yeah, that's just, I wanted to share that because I think it's, it's an example of the kind of things I think that just are starting to come up, and how it's this just ever changing thing. And I've no doubt, there will be even more things and more realizations and more kind of connections, and it's just this ever changing experience. Again, like I said in another video, I do, and I can't help but feel so much richer for this, and the depth and the complexity of these feelings and emotions. Whilst it's sad in the moment and it can be painful in the moment, I always come out the other side, like now, and I just feel like really like grateful and happy that I'm getting to experience this. It kind of probably sounds a little bit weird. I don't really know how to explain it, but I just feel so much richer for having these feelings, and for being able to feel the depths of these emotions. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are. We're gonna be a boomtown on Mum's. Feels weird to call it an anniversary, like a death anniversary. It's a really morbid thing. Will we put them down? Yeah, we will. It'll be on the Friday. I'm sure Mum would be flipping chuffed with that. She'd be like, yes, that's the perfect way to spend it. But anyway, that's me for today. And I shall see you guys in the next one.